as I learned at Florida State, Mets fans are people too. Um,
I'm gonna have to differ with you on that one. I don't think that that's true. I think that Mets fans are missing some of the necessary genomes to make them human beings.
well, I do. Right. So let's, okay. I'm going to power through that.
Recorded live from the Maddie Johnson podcast studio at GOT Sound Studio in Columbia, South Carolina. This is the All About Nothing podcast. The views expressed on this program are the opinions of the host. Some content and subject matter may not be appropriate. Listener discretion is advised. Listeners are encouraged to follow the show at theallaboutnothing.com for links to social media and more. Listeners can call the show at 803-672-0533. Thank you for listening.
Welcome to the All About Nothing podcast. I am Barrett Gruber, and I am joined again by returning champion Ben Kitchings from the History Voyager Podcast. Welcome, Ben, to the All About Nothing podcast. Thank you.
Hello, Barrett. How are you doing today?
I'm all right. It's been a little while since we last recorded together, so I think that we both agree that there was a subject that probably needed to be addressed because I have concerns about it. But
Moore versus Harper.
Yeah, Moore versus Harper.
I have concerns as well, and I don't want to,
Sure.
I don't want to say that I don't.
Just as a warning, everyone listening, Ben and I have been talking about this before we started recording, so it's not. So there may be context that gets missed, but on some of the outside of the recording conversation. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, so let's try to bring folks up to speed. So Moore versus Harper is about the independent state legislature doctrine.
Correct.
Which is a theory that was first given voice 22 years ago. God, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
It was given voice 22 years ago during the Bush v. Gore situation.
Correct.
Before the Supreme Court. Now, according to... So Moore versus Harper takes place in North Carolina.
Right.
Arises out of a court in North Carolina. It would essentially overthrow a precedent going all the way back to 1825. And in some states, a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
Where the population would have no say in voting for the electors.
And ultimately, it's not necessarily what the case is about, but the precedent that the case could potentially unfold into. Basically, this is a gerrymandering case.
Yeah, it's a gerrymandering case, and I said this on my own podcast. On a bad day, the United States of America is the third biggest economy in the world.
Right.
Okay. Now, the problem here is that economy takes place in maybe 131, 135 counties out of the whole thousands and thousands of counties.
Correct. The largest cities or the cities with a population that can support that
okay.
economy.
So that's the problem. The other problem is that not only does the economy happen there, but most of the people actually live there too. So, okay. Right. Therein is the problem. Now, in the last, I don't know, what year is this today? 2022.
Yeah,
in the last 17 years, it's been, shall we say trendy? Shall we say a trend? I don't know. For folks in the more suburban and urban counties to vote Democratic and folks in the countryside to vote Republican and or Libertarian, let's say. Now, I don't know if you know this, but yours truly wrote about this ad nauseum for years, years ago.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember being shouted down several times back in the early days. It really is a trip for me to read the Atlantic now and, hey, that's me, except you're not me. You're writing my ideas. I'm not accusing anybody of plagiarism. I'm just saying some things are in the zeitgeist now, kids.
You were ahead of your time.
I was. It's a curse. Okay. So what I said back in the day was there is a rift in the white political culture in this country, okay?
Sure.
Now, what some people, and I'm not talking about your Mitch McConnells and your Brett Kavanaughs and all that. I'm talking like the people, like the actual people.
Right.
What some people seem to think is that they are defending a culture by voting for a certain party.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Now, what this Moore versus Harper could do, and I'm not saying it would, but I'm saying it could do, is it would ossify that split.
Yeah.
Now, let me give you a politically realist, and that's actually my school of thought. Some people accuse me of being a liberal. I'm really a political realist. Let me give you a political realist view on why you wouldn't want to do Moore versus Harper. If you were, say, the Supreme Court or the shadow docket or whoever pays them to decide how they decide. Okay.
Oh, no, I agree. I agree. I think a lot of people take their marching orders, and the Supreme Court has solidified that.
Right. Okay. So let me tell you the realist version of why you wouldn't want to decide, why you would say, okay, you can gerrymander all you want for, representative but you have to let the people vote for the electors. I mean, it's, you just do. Okay. Because things happen, things take place. Okay. When you look at the French Revolution, the reason the French Revolution happened, well, one of the main reasons was because the legal system in France was a basket case.
Of course. Yes.
It was a complete basket case. You literally had a situation where you could have 5 different people in the same room at the same time on the same day, and each one of those 5 people was under a completely different set of laws, adjudicated by completely different sets of people. So you had this ancient system. There's a reason they called it the ancient regime. Okay, you had this ancient system that ran into debt, that ran into a massive mountain of debt that they accumulated in part by providing us to, a way for this country to be independent from the British.
Sure. Right.
Okay. So this massive mountain of debt happened, and then madcap hilarity ensues, and we had a revolution which either did or did not work, depending on, which school of thought you happen to. It either worked or it didn't, depending on what you choose to pay attention to.
You mean which old white wig you wore versus the other old white wig, right?
No, historian wise.
Yeah.
Depending on if you're a historian, right? Depending on what parts of it you choose to pay attention to, it either worked perfectly or it backfired horrendously.
Yeah. No, I was just making a joke about the fact that all of them wore white powdered wigs, but go ahead.
Okay. So let me give you a real example of what I'm talking about with the rogue legislative doctrine. What it would say is that the essentially, if you go all the way, right? If you go all the way to the wall on this thing, you're saying that the legislature can set aside a court decision, can just
Correct.
set aside court decisions. I don't think that you could do that.
Specifically what they want is they want to have oversight of federal elections when it comes to redistricting. In this case, they want to the legislatures want the court to stay out of their decisions. Ultimately, they want to have final say without any court interpreting or any courts rendering decision. Because just recently, we've seen multiple states where gerrymandering has become so just obtuse. I mean, it's so you have neighbors that live next to each other that ultimately should not be in different districts, but they do because it aligns correctly for whichever party is in control of the legislature. And in those particular states, we have seen the courts come down and say, no, this needs to be redone based on some sort of redistricting needs to occur based on simple, intelligent decisions, not decisions where you're literally winding down people's neighborhoods so that you can pick up these registered Republicans or these registered Democrats. And that's the idea, is that the legislatures do not want the courts to come in and say, hey, this is ridiculous. You guys were clearly high and drunk when you made these lines. Ultimately, that's what they want, is they don't want the courts coming in and stepping in and saying anything about that. The precedent that set is...
and I agree. I agree that eventually it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
The problem... Okay, so let me back up a sec, because I didn't say what I was going to say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
about it's my fault about the split in the white culture.
Oh, sure. Yes.
There's a group of folks that are, I'll call them metropolitans. And there's something called collisions, which is where you meet people that are different from you. And so therefore you have different opinions than some other people that you might know. And
sure,
maybe because you meet, say, the gay coworker or the black coworker or the white coworker or the Buddhist, or the Buddhist roommate or the whatever, you meet different folks.
Yeah, they make up a different portion of society than you normally would fit into as far as a particular sect.
Exactly. As I learned at Florida State, Mets fans are people too.
I'm gonna have to differ with you on that one. I don't think that that's true. I think that Mets fans are missing some of the necessary genomes to make them human beings.
Well, I do. Right. So let's okay. I'm gonna power through that. Hi, Bill. How you doing? If you're a listener, don't know if you are, but yada yada yada. Okay, so we have metropolitans and we have what I'll call the traditionals, which are very sort of traditional and very kind of they essentially what they want is they want what they perceive in, say, Sweden or Germany, where there's this sort of ambient sort of American culture that they just feel like that needs to predominate.
Right.
The problem with that from an economic standpoint, in a world where you have what I'll call a symbol manipulation economy, is that you have to pick the best person to be the economist or to be the computer programmer or to be the whatever.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Yeah. I agree.
And because that congregates in a city and because you end up in the problem. Now, if you go all the way to the wall on this rogue legislature doctrine, you would essentially freeze the political split. And my little theory on that is everything would rock along okay until there was a problem.
Sure.
Until there was like a thing that happened. Let me give you an example. COVID. Except what if COVID, instead of killing less than 1% of people, say it killed 15%?
Sure.
Okay. Say if you had... Okay, right now, as we record this today, we have monkeypox running around. Now, the best medical minds right now don't exactly know if that's because the monkey's habitat has moved into North America or not. They don't think it has, but there's still this thought that maybe, perhaps, there are some rogue monkeys running around.
That's an interesting theory.
It's not a theory that anybody takes seriously. But
okay,
it's like,
okay.
Including, by the way, me. I should say that right now.
Someone has attached the word theory to it. I see. I understand.
It's not even a theory. It's like it's a very worst case scenario that somehow you know what I'm saying? Like
yeah.
It's mostly probable that somebody got on a plane and somebody had monkeypox and somebody brought it to somewhere.
Yeah, I've seen the memes running around some of the individuals on my Facebook and Twitter and whatnot, and I read what they say, and I have to laugh at it. But let's say something happens. Let's say we're talking about a catastrophe.
I'm talking about like a bad catastrophe that's going to need a political solution.
Okay,
that's beyond COVID. Something catastrophic beyond COVID. Like say you had a bad case of Ebola.
Okay. All right.
That's an example.
Right.
Okay. Or say, what's another one? I don't know.
Sure.
Something really bad
that our food, our entire food supply becomes infected with E. coli or something like that.
Exactly.
Something that requires some sort of bureaucratic political attack on it to take care of making sure that we've got, that there's some way of still feeding everybody while taking care of whatever caused this issue.
Or say like the Dust Bowl came back or
sure.
Whatever. Well, we live in a system where we get societal remedies politically.
Okay.
So if you have permanent one-party rule, which is if you take this all the way to the wall, you'd have permanent one-party rule.
Right.
You wouldn't be able to solve the problem politically.
Okay. Sure. Correct.
So that would be a problem. Another issue is that America is very, very much connected to the global economy.
Agreed.
All you have to do is have a podcast where you talk to folks all over the world, and you learn that really fast.
Sure.
That this country is connected to the global economy.
Again, History Voyager Podcast available on all of your platforms. Sorry.
All of them, every single one.
Everyone.
I'm even in some libraries, apparently. Okay. Anyway, so one of the reasons we're the dollar or the currency of the world is because we have a stable government.
Right.
We have a stable government, and we have our populace is basically, you don't see revolutions in the street.
Sure.
On the order of, say, I don't know, France or Sri Lanka.
France, and you're talking about countries that have a much smaller populations compared to the United States. And of course the United States is immense. I mean, we have a very large span across a very large continent. So it's not. I recognize what you mean. The problem is that I think that we have seen, not revolutions necessarily, but I think that we have seen protests on such a scale really beginning in 2016. I mean, or 2017, I guess, after Trump took office. We have seen where we have groups that feel disenfranchised or feel like they're not recognized, between Black Lives Matter and these Antifa groups and things like that they have a message that they want to present and promote, but so we have seen some of these I guess I mean, even the streets of South Carolina here in Columbia, when kid was shot down in North Charleston. I mean, the Black Lives protests that went on here, and that's in Columbia. Wow. And Columbia is roughly about 1 million people between the two major counties here and that make up Columbia.
Charleston, I don't know, is Charleston bigger than Columbia?
Charleston and Greenville, Spartanburg, generally those are recognized as being marginally larger. Charleston, but there were Black Lives Matter protests in Charleston. There were police brutality protests against in Charleston and Greenville as well. And Greenville is considered much more of a Republican district than liberal or Democratic. Charleston also is leans towards being a little bit more conservative than liberal. But but really and truly, politics in South Carolina it's really dependent on how you present yourself. You can be a Democrat and get elected in South Carolina if you recognize that where you came from or what it is that you're trying to represent. You can get elected in South Carolina as long as you put your boots on the ground. You are walking in the streets. You are visiting homes. You're knocking on doors, and ultimately, I think that's going to be beneficial for a number of the Democratic candidates that I've even interviewed on my show, because they're younger. I mean, South Carolina, most of what makes up the state legislature here is past their prime, and I say that with as much vigor and make it sound as awful as possible, because we are represented by some of the oldest farts I think that are walking on this planet. And if they can be replaced, please, dear whomever, let's get rid of them.
I've said before, I think I might have said this on air, but I've told people that I think one of the biggest problems we have, not a big problem, but one of the underlying problems we have is you have old people that don't have a smartphone making decisions.
Sure. Here in South Carolina, we have what is going to wind up being a very heated superintendent of education race, and not because it's two candidates that are well versed in what it takes to be the superintendent, but because we have one candidate who is ultimately extremely qualified and absolutely deserves deserves the opportunity to be the superintendent of education in South Carolina, and another candidate who's probably you know what, I'm not going to say anything negative. I'm just going to say she does not have the qualifications to even meet the standards of what the superintendent of education for South Carolina needs, which one is a master's. She does not have. So she is running a campaign on the idea that she hopes she will have her master's by the time she gets sworn in, if elected. I feel like that should be, I feel like that's something that the voters should recognize as a weakness, that she basically, not as a strength, because I mean, we've all been, I imagine that we've all been in positions or jobs where there was something that we potentially couldn't do, but maybe bettered ourselves or educated ourselves so that we could do or perform that job. A master's is an educational standard. That is a next level as far as like bachelor's degree or associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's. Okay, you work your way through the process. She happened to find a school, Bob Jones University, that would allow her to fast pace her education to get her master's in a very short time so that she would meet that qualification. I feel like, and I'm just making assumptions, that someone's cutting some corners. And do you really want to be represented in education by someone who has found ways to cut corners in order to get that job?
Well, I mean, okay, so I get that. I get what you're saying. But I mean, so there's a lot of, so here's, I said on my podcast with King Williams, because this is kind of a follow up to that.
Yeah.
I said on my podcast to King Williams that, and I hate to use this term, but I don't know another term to call it, but to handicap the decision, or to predict, I guess, the decision. I think they're gonna say you have to let the people vote for president, because there's just so many laws that say. Yeah. I mean,
and I recognize what you're saying. My fear is, and this, and I bring this back around to what I said about the fact that the party that's in power, the conservative party that's in power in South Carolina specifically, is aging out. And just like Donald Trump, there is this idea that they want their names or they want their specific ideals to carry on, even though they may not be there. And it is such a desperate move to retain power that the people that control, so, you know, the individuals that selected the 3 Supreme Court justices that came in under Trump was the Federalist Society. The Federalist Society doesn't just, they don't make their own decisions. They have people, they have very top level people that are in control of major corporations like the Koch brother, the Koch delivery, transportation. You have, I guess there's only one Koch brother now. But there are individuals that have influence over even the Federalist Society. So there, you know, it's a pyramid. It goes up and up and up. And my fear, and I get that right now it's just a fear until I see things moving in a direction that shows me that this is likely outcome. My fear is that the party that is ruling by minority is so afraid of losing that power for generations to come that they will do anything out of desperation to try and retain that power and then hold that power, because they've figured out how to rule by minority by having the filibuster firmly in place, and by I don't know, holding the carrot out in front of Democrats that will side with them when it comes to trying to end the filibuster, like Manchin and Sinema. My fear is that by having those individuals, that they will see something like Moore versus Harper and say, okay, so now that the independent state legislature has been confirmed by the Supreme Court, now we can start to maneuver ourselves under this decision, which it's a fairly broad decision that'll be made, and it will allow. But then you'll see these state legislatures start to come across and say, okay, well, now that we've now that we have redistricted the way that we want to without any sort of court coming in and saying, no, you can't do this anymore, now we can get the votes exactly the way we want to. Now it's still the people representing. That's still the people voting for what they want. But and again, this is a big if, but if people recognize that it's going to take more to sway elections because, or to move those elections in a progressive way away from the conservative regression, I think my fear is that they will then come in and try to change the Constitution. And if people don't, that's the biggest thing. I want to put all my faith in the idea that people are intelligent, but I don't know that they are.
Let me give the Republican Party a bit of free advice. And I got shouted years ago. I was shouted down for even saying this, but here we go.
I'd like to think the Republican Party would be willing to pay for your advice.
Okay, well, this is free advice.
Okay.
To the Republican Party. Barrett, what is the most successful immigrant group today?
The most successful immigrant group? Europeans.
Today.
Oh, Asians.
No.
No?
Africans from Africa. So
really?
Not African Americans, but the children of Africans from Africa.
Okay.
Are the most, so they're African Americans, but they're really from, like, their parents are from Africa.
Sure. Natively, they were born in Africa.
That is the most successful immigrant group today.
Okay.
They're a church-going group. They're overwhelmingly evangelical or Catholic. They're socially conservative. They're entrepreneurial. Who am I talking about? I'm hitting all the pillars of the Republican Party.
Of course.
If you just edit out the race,
and I agree with you. The only problem that I have is, in reality, the Republican Party isn't necessarily made up of individuals who are entrepreneurs. Sure, go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Hang on, hold on. So this next group is either right. They're neck and neck, but it's the Koreans.
All right.
The two most successful immigrant groups are the Koreans and the Africans the Africans natively from Africa.
Sure.
Again, socially conservative. Again, religious.
Yeah.
Tell me where it's written down that free health care is not a conservative position. Bearing in mind that Hungary, one of the most conservative member of NATO, gives its citizens free health care.
Well, I think we also have to, and we may have to pick this up in the next after a break, but I think it needs to be recognized that healthcare in none of these first world countries and developing countries where there is the availability of universal healthcare, it isn't free. It's being paid for.
Okay, it's being paid for in taxes. All right, you're right. So maybe we need to but here's what I'm going to say. If the Republican Party dropped the racism, embraced the conservative immigrant groups that are already here, and turned wildly to the left on healthcare, they would never lose an election, and you could make it as free and fair as you wanted.
Sure.
And I said that once years ago, and I was shouted out. I was literally shouted out of a room.
That's a shame. It's a truth. It's a fact.
I'm just saying.
That's
free advice to the Republican Party.
Well, I tell you what. Let's take a break, and when we come back after the break, we'll dive more into the Moore versus Harper and our discussion. But we'll take a break and we'll come back and discuss it. This is the All About Nothing podcast. I got Ben Kitchings from the History Voyager podcast with us, and we will be right back. All right, Nothingers, I want to cue you in about a friend of the pod, Blank Canvas Brand. If you own a business or restaurant and the time has come to build that unique brand, you have got to get a hold of Blank Canvas Brand. Blank Canvas Brand specializes in brand identity, including logos, business cards, flyers, and anything else to promote your business. And now, Blank Canvas Brand offers printing services to help with your clothing needs, including sports teams. I can tell you from our own experience, Blank Canvas Brand is responsible for our logo, as well as the Bowl of Duty bowling team logo, and we couldn't be happier with what's been produced. For more information, you can search Facebook for Blank Canvas, or you can email Blank Canvas at theallaboutnothing.com. That's BLNKCANVS at theallaboutnothing.com. You can find links in the Friends of the Pod section of our website. Visit theallaboutnothing.com. Hey everyone, I want to take a quick moment to mention one of our new sponsors, thepaintedmoment.com. That's thepaintedmoment.com. Check this out. Have you ever taken a photo with your phone or digital camera that would look amazing as a watercolor canvas painting? Well, now there's a website ready to take your photo and turn it into digital painted moments. This is how it works. Visit thepaintedmoment.com, follow the instructions, and your digital photo will be enhanced and returned to you with links on where you can have an image printed to canvas or whatever else you'd like to do with it. We've already got a couple of these enhanced photos hanging around the house, and trust me, you'll love what comes out. Thepaintedmoment.com. Create a painted moment in time from your digital photos. Thepaintedmoment.com. Seriously, check them out today. Thepaintedmoment.com. What is a vaccine? What is a virus? What is a mask? What's a Sasquatch? These are all valid questions, and to answer them in one breath, prevention, potentially deadly, potentially life-saving, and don't be stupid. Look, the coronavirus from 2019 has caused a global pandemic that continues to ravage our planet, leaving victims and survivors. But you can do your part. In the United States, as well as most countries around the world, the COVID-19 vaccine is available at little to no cost. Regardless of your politics, this virus has the potential to cause irreparable harm to you and vulnerable family members and friends. We have an opportunity through the efforts of medical science to balance the scales against this disease and its variants. And look, I don't understand how the vaccine works, even though I've heard it described countless times by countless experts. And even though none of that makes any sense to me, I do recognize that the money and effort spent on the vaccine has not been wasted. And it's not a global positioning transmitter being embedded in your arm. You're holding that in your hand, listening to this. So get the vaccine. Protect yourself. Protect your loved ones. Hell, protect the guy standing behind you waiting on his taco supreme and nacho fries. Let that be the reason his organs shut down. For more information, visit covid19.nih.gov for actual science information. We have to thank our sponsor, GOT Sound Studio, and its owner and operator, Dominique Stewart, better known as Neek the Geek. GOT Sound Studios offers a variety of recording experiences from music, voice, and instrumental recordings and production, as well as podcasts. GOT Sound Studio is located in Columbia, South Carolina, and operated by the most talented producer and engineer in the business. GOT Sound Studio is a Black-owned business. Bring your recording business needs here. You can find details on their Facebook page or by calling 803-243-2302 or emailing gotsounds@theallaboutnothing.com. That's gotsounds@theallaboutnothing.com. You can find links in the Friends of the Pod section of our website. Visit theallaboutnothing.com.
Yo, it's your boy Jefferson Cash coming live to you from Los Angeles, California, and you listening to the All About Nothing podcast.
All right, and welcome back to the All About Nothing podcast. Welcome, Ben, of course, back to the show. We of course, you've been listening to us for a half hour. Okay, truth be told, we're separated by about 24 hours because we were recording yesterday and then I had to leave, and now we're back. So welcome back, Ben. Thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a Sunday. I don't have anything to do until Monday. How
there
are
you go.
Doing? Blah, blah, blah.
No, that's good. I'm virtually the same way. Although I sent you pictures. You didn't, I don't know if you commented on them or not, but I went kayaking this morning on the river, and it was really, really nice. It was really foggy, and we all survived. That's what's important.
It looked beautiful. Beautiful.
Oh, I love it.
I'm glad you went into the river with as many people, or came out of the rivers with as many people as you went in with.
Exactly. The only ones that don't come back are the ones that we intend not to come back. That's how I justify it.
Yeah.
So cool. Before the break, we were talking about, of course, the Moore versus Harper case, but we were discussing healthcare. We started to work our way into healthcare, and I had mentioned that in nowhere in the planet is healthcare just free. And then I got to thinking about it last night. I went on my first honeymoon to Mexico, and at the time I had a terrible migraine, and in that in that situation with the migraine, of course, I did not have my migraine medication because I didn't think I would need it. So I was taken to a health clinic where I was treated and never once charged anything for the services as someone on a that was visiting the country. So literally, we have Canada to our north and Mexico to our south that have a universal healthcare system for all people. It's not just not just for the citizens that are paying into it. That it's one of those things that I come back to when it comes to such as the Roe versus Wade case that was overturned with the Dobbs decision, and that in our Constitution, in the 14th Amendment, there is, and I have to pull it up just so that I'm saying it exactly correctly, because if I don't, I'll hate myself. I really will. All persons being born naturalized in the United States, yada yada yada, says no state shall make or enforce any laws which shall abridge the privileges of immunity of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And I feel like, as long as we're interpreting the Constitution and what was intended with the words, I feel like that idea of any state depriving a person of life, liberty, or property, I think health falls into that life category. So in my head, I feel as though in the United States, we've already got the law in place to allow for a universal health care. I'm not saying it's going to be for everybody. I mean, it should be it'll be available to everybody, but I'm saying that it's something that I think it should be, it should compete against private insurance so that we could get private insurances to, that bubble to pop. But the ultimately, I think, again, if we're interpreting the Constitution based on the words that are written, then life has to include health. And, in order to have a life, there has to be health involved in it. So I
agree. And I also, yesterday, I read the Dobbs decision. I believe, I guess there's a terminology called the legal fiction, right?
Right.
So the legal fiction that we've entered into, or the legal condition that we've entered into here, is that a fetus is a life, be that a couple days old or whatever, it is a life. And so therefore, whatever. So that's the legal fiction or the legal condition or what have you. If my question now is severalfold. One of them is, okay, does this mean that fathers start paying alimony? Does it mean that women can sit in the HOV lane? Pregnant women, can they be in the HOV lane now? Or, how far do you want to take it? I mean, that's ridiculous, but
ultimately, I think that is how, if you're going to, because in Texas is specifically where you had a woman driving in the HOV lane. She gets pulled over because she looks as though she's just a single person in a vehicle driving in the HOV lane. And it's from everything I've read, it sounds like she basically just refused the ticket. You can't give that to me. There are two people in this car, and I have to acknowledge that, frankly, it really irritates me, because that was my joke way before this woman pulled this stunt. I had already told that joke, and here we are. I swear.
But
Jimmy Kimmel steals my jokes all the time. Anyway,
so yesterday, I was struggling to come up with a problem that we were going to run into that would require a political solution.
Okay, sure.
And then when we got off, like when we quit recording,
did you come up with one?
It hit me like a 2x4. Yeah. It hit me like a metaphorical 2x4.
Yeah.
All right. Watch. You can't see me. I can see you, but watch.
Okay.
Metaphorically speaking.
Okay.
Right now, gas is what? $3.50 a gallon, close to $4.
I think I filled up for $3.61 yesterday.
At some point in the lives of either you and me or your children, the oil table in this country and indeed around the world is going to fail.
That is the point at which we are still able to drill for oil, correct?
Well, it's going to start to fail.
Okay.
Right. And then it's going to fail. But when it starts to fail, the price of gas is going to go up.
Of course.
And you're going to get people, because everything is political, right? Everything is political. You're going to get people saying, no, the oil table's not failing. The Constitution says that I should pay $2.50 a gallon for gas, blah, blah, blah. You're going to get somebody agreeing with that, yada, yada, yada. At some point, the government is somebody, be it the government or somebody, is going to have to step in. And they're going to have to start saying things like, we need to have electric cars, we need to have electric car infrastructure, or whatever. We need to move past gasoline, whether we want to or not.
True. Okay. Yes, I agree.
Now, whether that's going to be tomorrow or 20, 30, 40 years from now, I'm not in these rooms anymore. I'm not in these meetings anymore. But I remember seeing data saying there was only 50 years of oil in the ground anywhere.
Yeah, and that was something that I think that's almost always something that's been told to us, is that there's a finite amount of oil that's going to be available. And then you find out that the United States alone, I don't know where it's located, but we apparently have 100-year supply that could potentially supply the United States for 100 years at the levels that we currently use oil and fuel. And I have to know, where is this oil being held? Because, I get that oil's been around long enough that there is not really a shelf life for it, but I don't know how long we're going to last when it comes to fossil fuels like oil. I know that coal is one of those ones that, they're willing to, I mentioned it before, but they're willing to cut entire mountains down to sea level just to go after, or lower, just to go after the coal. And West Virginia is going from mountain country to,
flat.
Yeah, and they're this is, I understand that Joe Manchin does represent West Virginia, but he's the guy that's willing to sell West Virginia to the coal companies because they put money in his pocket. And he doesn't have any concern, because he's one of the Democrats that was like, EPA, why do they need power? But EPA are the people that are going after the oil, the coal companies that are letting their sludge just filter down into the creeks that are literally giving people cancer and killing them. Those are the West Virginia people he represents.
I don't know how much longer we're going to be having coal-fired power plants to begin with. Maybe they're going to build new ones. I don't know.
No, I think that there is such a desire to hold on to that old way of doing things, because look, I am not somebody that believes that in nuclear weapons. When we were scaling down our nuclear weapons and Russia was potentially scaling down their nuclear weapons, I'm absolutely in favor of working with other countries to scale down, to eliminate. But I am absolutely in favor of nuclear power. Replace because they do not put out any emissions. It is just raw power that is driving steam, or driving water into steam that turns turbines. And I get that we need to figure out what to do with the nuclear waste or the nuclear rods that are no longer capable. But they're smart people all over the planet. We could figure out what to do with these nuclear rods that have been spent.
Yeah, I get it. But that was the example of the problem that you're going to run into, and you don't want to have a single party system.
Agreed.
Or I don't know.
You and I don't want a single party system. I still go back to this idea that if North Carolina legislature is so desperate to gerrymander that they're willing to have a case go before the Supreme Court to basically render courts useless, or that courts have no opinion on matters involving states and elections and things like that, just to get their gerrymandering, that is a level of desperation. Why not just have good ideas that people would be willing to vote for? That ultimately.
Well, because right,
that's
exactly.
The easy way
and
out.
here we have a problem. Here we have a problem.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I agree with you. we could spend this time agreeing with each other.
Do you want to find the things that we disagree with?
Well, not necessarily, but I'm just saying,
I will just say this. I have a theory about JFK's death, and I don't think this is a conspiracy theory yet until it picks up, I have a theory.
Okay. What's your theory?
So first I'll just predicate it with shortly after after JFK's death, very shortly after, the Secret Service moved from using M16s to smaller, more safe and easily usable firearms. At one point, I think they were using like the Israeli Uzis, but shortly after JFK's death, they moved away from using the M16s, and this is and I don't have any evidence to back this up. I'd have to look it up, but so my conspiracy theory is that Lee Harvey Oswald took the first shot. The Secret Service soldier, Secret Service agent, who you see jumping into the car, I have heard that there is the potential that in his leaping to try and protect the president with a weapon over his shoulder, may have fired off the other round that gives us this belief that JFK was that there were two shots that killed JFK, one from one direction and one from another, and that would to me that makes the most sense.
Okay.
That was
Here's my guiding belief. Here's my guiding belief with all conspiracy theories ever.
Yeah.
Okay. There is no grand conspiracy. There is massive rank incompetence.
Oh, for sure. Where do we want to put my incompetence?
Where do we want to put? Okay. That said, I know somebody who's in my phone right now.
Yeah.
I'm not going to call this person, but I know them. I talk to them on the regular, and they, honest to God, they swear to me that they've actually seen. There's like the Zapruder film, and there's like the footage that gets edited out or whatever.
Yeah,
and they swear to me they've actually seen footage of somebody in the car turning to shoot JFK.
Well, I don't know that it was done intentionally, but if we're gonna go with my theory, then we're both right.
Now, my theory is I don't have a theory. My theory is, I'm back at why do you think that he couldn't have done it by himself? Why do you think?
I don't know. I don't know enough about Lee Harvey Oswald to know what was his skill set. It seemed like based on
he did actually. Okay, wait. This is something that a lot of people of our age, because we were joking off air about TikTokers and they're not being old enough to know things.
Yeah.
Okay.
I knew he was a Marine.
He did. Okay. He did actually attempt to assassinate a general.
Yep, I do.
Prior to this.
Yep.
Okay. And it either, I forget, it either almost worked or it's just blind luck that it didn't work. I forget.
Yeah.
So he wasn't a bad, first of all, he was capable of doing it emotionally or whatever. Number one. Number two, he's got a track record.
Sure. Yeah.
So I go back to, okay, the thing when I read that report, the thing that I just want to come back to is, I forget the man's name, the mobster, the Jack Ruby.
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Explain to me, please. Now let's pretend like we're all living in 2022 and, homosexuality is a lot more out of the closet today than it was in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Explain to me how it is that Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald kept living in the same area. And in the 19th,
I know people that live in. I was gonna say I know people that live in Dallas that live in Texas and can't get out. So that's my only.
Well, my point is like Jack Ruby kept moving, and so did Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, they never did kind of a social background on Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah.
Missing from this today, if you go commit a crime of this caliber, right? Somebody somewhere, be it the FBI or somebody, is going to do a social. They're going to do a social background check on you. That's why they always go to your social media. It's why all these school shooters, they all go to their social media. They all talk to their friends.
Yeah.
Blah blah blah. So in the 1960s, nobody bothered to ask, why was it that Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby ended up drinking at the same bars?
That's a good question.
Nobody asked that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it was I'm saying like they knew each other and maybe there was a relationship there, capital R. Really?
Yeah. Okay.
Relationship. Maybe there wasn't. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. Today you would ask that question. Today, the average homicide gumshoe would ask the question.
Yeah. And
they just didn't ask the question in the 1960s or 70s, whenever that was.
Well, what was the official reason that Jack Ruby, what was the reason? What was the cause, or the cause that was the effect of him assassinating Lee Harvey Oswald? Like what was disclosed as being the reason? Do we know? I mean, do you know? I don't know.
I mean, we know. I used to know. I guarantee you, if we quit this and I'll think about it for a couple hours. Oh yeah, Jesus. Okay, it was like he was. Apparently, he was trained or something. He was very much pro or anti-Castro.
Okay.
Which is weird because how do you go from being communist to anti-communist in the same body?
Oh.
How do you go from being far left to far right in the same?
Yeah.
So some people, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. But what's interesting, and I always thought that was interesting, was that they sort of they didn't live together, but they kind of lived around each other. They kept moving to the same types of places.
Yeah.
Or the same areas. And that just always, to me, I just always, I'm not, and podcaster Ben Kitchings says Lee Harvey Oswald is gay. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we would ask the question now.
Yeah. And I don't disagree. I definitely think that there are individuals that probably would ask that question first.
And they never bothered to. Lee Harvey Oswald, I mean, Jack Ruby had fingers in pies that they never could account for. Even if you adjust for the mafia thing, like never could account for all the money the man had, even if you adjust for all the mob stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, who knows how far up the guy was, or whether or not he was connected to somebody, or
I mean, there are people that still that ultimately believe that Kennedy's death was the result of like you were mentioning, mobsters. That this was a hit from the not
from on high.
And that Oswald may or may not have been a player, but that's like, are they making the assumption that because there's two shooters potentially, and let's say Oswald had his reasons to do it, and the shooter in the grassy knoll had their reasons because they were being backed by the mobsters. I don't know. You know what? There's a screenplay in there somewhere.
Okay, let me, and I'm gonna get back around to a solid point. Let me just tell you a story, okay?
Okay.
So you don't live in Atlanta anymore. Spoiler alert: we used to go to high school together,
right?
But so I have a buddy that used to walk by this bridge. By this 85 bridge that burned a few years ago.
All right.
Now, actually more than a few years ago. He used to walk past that bridge all the time. And he'd be talking to me, like he'd be on the phone with me, and he'd be saying like, man, there's a lot of stuff from the state of Georgia and the DOT under this bridge.
Yeah.
Somebody should really move that. Oh, look, there's a couch under here. Yada, yada, yada. He was doing this for, I don't know, several years before Basil Ellaby came and and prove to all the 9/11 truthers out there that actually concrete does burn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's
the thing.
Yeah.
My buddy, because of his job, had access to a lot of those databases where stuff was stored. So he gets to work the next day, like after the thing happened, like literally that next morning.
Yeah.
All right. Round about 12 o'clock that afternoon, he said, I decided to check the database to see what was what. You know what? All the records for all that stuff disappeared.
Wow.
Here's what I'm saying. Let me get back around to this JFK story, okay? You're the Secret Service,
right?
Right? The president ends up dead on your watch,
right?
You've got to okay, holy crap, the president died. We this is the failure. We've okay. Here's the thing: we can't let people know this guy was, maybe not a crack shooter, but not a slouch.
Right.
We got to come up with
a backstory. We got
to come up. Hurry.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's his military records we just found. Yeah. I don't disagree. I think that we are manipulated at a very high level when it comes to an attempt to control the narrative. So I don't disagree at all. I completely. Yeah. So once again, we found our way into agreement.
But my buddy was saying, like, Ben, all that stuff disappeared. Like, it just vanished from the spreadsheet, from the database.
But he knew it was there. He knew it was there before.
He knew it was there before, but it wasn't like where they said it was.
Right.
Like it was in the database. It just wasn't where they said it was.
Right.
He was walking past it. But then he said, like, Ben, what this means is somebody from on high decided this stuff needed to disappear.
Yeah.
It just needed to vanish.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that stuff does happen. I don't have any reason to think that it doesn't. No one's, there's no way anybody's going to prove to me that it doesn't. So we have a few more minutes. How I guess so. The only real defense I think that we as citizens have is to be smart electorates. We have to be intelligent about what it is that we're voting for, because
for something, if we just have a few more minutes for something like this, here's what I want to, and I want to talk specifically to the people that believe that you can legislate morality, and the people that see the Republican Party as some kind of bulwark against whatever they think is wrong with society.
Right.
And I'm not talking specifically to your problems, whoever you are. Think about your grandchildren, or your maybe your great-grandchildren, or your grandchildren who aren't even born. Do you want this person living in a world with a one-party system? Because I talk to people in China. It's one of my favorite type of guests is somebody from China. And they'll tell me things like, you can't disagree with the government.
Right.
Like, and or whatever. And okay, we have the third largest economy in the world on a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's very few things that can happen politically that would disrupt that, except for to put this country squarely back in the Middle Ages. And if that happened, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and you believe that a one-party system would move us into an apocalyptic or dystopian society?
Well, no, not a one-party system per se, but if you started, okay, we now have to go by exactly what this document says.
Right.
It was written in the Middle Ages, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It was written in the Middle Ages. Do you really want to live in feudalism? Do you really want to live, that much closer to feudalism?
Yeah. I'm going to say no.
I mean,
I'm going to say no.
Well, I'm going to say no too.
Yeah.
But
we agreed again.
I mean,
can't do that. I'm sorry.
My thought, and I told you yesterday, to go back and listen to Mike Duncan's first couple episodes on the French Revolution.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about, people. We're talking about something, a legal system like that.
Yeah.
Because this country, our country, was set up in 17 whatever with the idea that if I had a problem with the town, I could move west of the town.
Right.
You can no longer do that.
Right.
Okay? I'm sorry. You can no longer do that. And if you brought back James Madison and all those other folks and you showed them that this is the deal, this is what's happening, I'm sure they would agree that,
yeah,
you know.
Oh yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Well, so one of the things I think I have to remind myself about, and people can agree, disagree, but Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, these were wealthy plantation owners. And that while they wanted autonomy from the federal government, they wanted the states to have state rights. I mean, that was the Democratic Republican Party, or the Republican Democratic Southerners, because it was a party unto itself from the Federalists, and the issue that they were most concerned with was making sure that the Southern states, the ones that had not taken or bore a lot of the financial burden from the Revolutionary War, they wanted to make sure that the Southern states that could pretty much take care of themselves economically because of slavery and plantations and cotton and tobacco, that those Southern states wouldn't be responsible for the financial burdens of the Revolutionary War on New York and Massachusetts and Maryland and such. So they were states' rights people, but somehow they still managed to come up with a constitution that was pretty. And I guess Hamilton played, and Burr played a whole, or not Burr, sorry, but Hamilton played a major role in that, making sure that the federal government was a strong central government, which was necessary in order to keep the states together. They worked together. They compromised in order to get it, but it was. I think I agree that if any of them, if any of the founding fathers had any sort of perspective on what was going on now, I absolutely believe that they probably would disagree with the idea that the court system, in a 3-branch system, because again, state of Georgia, you've got 3 branches. It's the courts, it's the executive with the governor and his staff, and lieutenant governors, secretary of states, that sort of thing, and then the legislature.
And I also did want to say there's like a whole raft of laws that says that all the legally allowed people that can vote get to vote on the president. I mean, there's a whole raft of laws, even in South Carolina, Georgia. It's in the Georgia Constitution even. So really what they're doing is they're creating this. There's actually, historically, there's actually a precedent for this. After we split off from the British government, right, the British Parliament ended up with a system where they had parliamentary constituencies that literally had no people because people had moved, or some of the constituencies had disappeared. So you're going to have the same type of problem with frozen things that represent fewer and fewer people.
Yeah.
And from a 10,000-foot level, everything's going to rock along to a point until something happens.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that thing is, but some things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will just say that my greatest concern is that there is so much desperation when it comes to this grasp on power. And I fear that the voters can be manipulated into believing in one thing that isn't what it's said to be. And I fear that you already have a 3 or 4% group that are avid Donald Trump supporters that are MAGA world hard as they can go. And that was enough to get him to the nominee status, and then from the nominee, the president. So my fear is that it doesn't take that large of a population of voters, or to move those mountains. My fear is that enough misinformation is like COVID in a movie theater. That misinformation, especially with social networking and Twitter and whatnot, it spreads so quickly and with no context at all, no evidence to support misinformation, and yet you can just say it in a way that makes
or
it
they're
sound like a question.
they're provided like evidence that they think is evidence, but it's not real. It's not doesn't match.
Yeah.
It doesn't match the facts on the ground or
Tucker Carlson
whatever.
is notorious for sitting on his show and putting up a picture of something over his I guess his left shoulder, and saying, are the Democrats going after your children? Are all the Democrats pedophiles? He says, I don't know. I'm just asking questions. You're asking questions that have no relevance. There's no thought that went into any of those.
Well,
except how scary can I make it?
I think the problem. So I talk about this on my show a lot, and a lot of people in this country believe this is an undercurrent going on in our country. Is we're coming into the realization that the media, by which I mean the mainstream media, which I hate that term, so the mainline media is dying. It's basically dying, and it has to grab viewers. It has to grab eyeballs in any way it can.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that, you're a baseball fan. I'm a baseball fan. We're both sort of in the new media landscape here.
Yeah.
When the
Bally Liberty.
Bally.
Yeah.
When they start making these streaming platforms for the different teams that we can subscribe to and get away from cable.
Yeah.
Cable's going to die.
I agree.
Literally, it's going to die.
Yep. No,
and
I totally agree.
The thing that worries me is, believe it or not, there are laws that say that they can't say certain things on cable. Fox News.
Right.
There are no laws like that on the internet.
Right.
There are literally no laws like that on the internet. And people people would say, like, we need to pull such and such off Facebook or whatever. We need to pull thus and such off Twitter or whatever.
Yeah.
And me, I'm like, no, you don't. Because right now you have grandma going on Facebook. When grandma goes on Reddit, that's the real problem.
Oh, yeah.
Like grandma going on 4chan, that's the real problem. So,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, just saying.
I don't disagree. Again, my fear is the fact that the misinformation becomes so toxic that it's almost undeniable. Like it's so if somebody says something like that is so shocking that it is, how could it not be true? Like it's so like, crazy. Who could make that up?
I'll give you an example that happened in my real life, and I've taken another step to ensure that this podcast won't go on my feed. And I'm so sorry, Barrett. Please come on my show and okay, please. Okay, my mother has a friend or somebody who used to be a friend of hers, who shall we say is adamant that UFOs exist.
Okay,
that she's very adamant that there's an active conspiracy that the government's trying to keep UFOs from blah, 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 blah.
Okay.
Somebody put on her feed, I swear to God, I'm not being mean, something that was obviously footage from a TV show. Okay.
Okay.
You and I both have seen 9/11. We both know what people running from something unexpected should look like.
Yeah.
In terms of how it's shot. Okay. This did not look like that. It looked steady cam. It looked way too clean, way too crisp. All that.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously from a show.
Right.
She was up one side and down the other about how the government is, right. And so I got tagged into this.
Oh no.
So of course this brought my friends into it. So my friend, blah 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 blah. So these people already exist.
Yeah.
I mean, they already exist in terms of no, I want to think this is happening, or I want to think that's happening.
Yeah.
Or yada yada yada.
No, it's absolutely designed to prey on those individuals, like I mentioned before, the disenfranchised, or the people that are legitimately or think that they are legitimately disenfranchised, and that it plays on what they already think. So what happens is, the media, the news media, will take that detail and then they'll add to it, and
there's a.
I was just gonna say, and they'll add to it, and what'll happen? They won't add to it to the point they'll pull like I said, the Tucker Carlson, where I'm just asking questions. That's how they get away with it.
And the problem I think, or the situation is, there was a group of folks that came up during Watergate, and they became politically conscious during Watergate.
Mm-hmm.
And Watergate was a big deal. Of course, what happened with Trump was, makes Watergate look like nothing, but Watergate was a big deal.
Yeah.
Right? And, that's part of the problem. And the other problem is, think about all the social changes that have happened in the last 50 or 60 years.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting scenario that we have playing out now.
Yeah.
And I agree. My hope is that good faith will reign, and that decisions that are made are in the best interest of everyone, not just the social elite or.
Well, let me help.
Sure.
I'm an optimist. Okay. I'm an optimist.
Sure.
I believe that we will be fine. The American people will be fine. We might have to make another country, or maybe another series of countries, right?
Yeah.
But I think we're going to be okay. I separate the political entity, the United States, from the American people.
Yeah.
Right? To me, those are separate entities.
Yeah.
We're going to be okay.
And while I don't disagree with ultimately being okay, I think that playing it safe and coming up with solutions that will protect, myself, my family, that sort of thing. That's ultimately, I don't want to get caught off guard. So if the Supreme Court makes the decisions, the state legislatures have autonomy without influence from the state courts, that's the first sign. So if they go that direction and they authorize it, then yes, I'll be concerned. Let's say we raise it to DEFCON 2, and we just wait.
I think also the thing that's happening in North Carolina that is also happening to a greater degree in Georgia.
Yeah.
Is you have a concentration of more, what did I call them yesterday? Metropolitan people.
Yeah.
But they're more concentrated in an area. And maybe also you have, maybe the Research Triangle, you have, like that. And I think maybe an older style of governance is trying to maintain hold. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it can maintain hold longer or whatever, but
yeah,
well,
yeah, I think I think we still, come October, we'll have an idea of where the Supreme Court is going to be going. There are decision days scheduled before the November election. And if this makes it in before the November election, again, the states are free to gerrymander if that happens. But again, for nearly all the states in the union, they have to put the change to a constitution in place using the voters. It has to be, and for most states, it has to be a general election. So it could not happen before this year's election. It could potentially happen before 2024. Not before 2024, but during the election 2024, because like I just mentioned, it requires being in the general election. You can't hide it in some vote that takes place at some June 15th. This is when the citizens of Georgia will vote on this change to the Constitution.
I think one of the things the Republican Party is dealing with is we literally don't know how many people died from COVID.
True.
And I have a podcast. At one time, it was the 15th most downloaded podcast on COVID in any language on earth. I would be out there asking folks about COVID, researching COVID. And I think, so there was a red flag with me. There was a red flag with me that everybody sailed past in Georgia.
Yeah.
Donald Trump got 50,000 fewer votes in 2020 than he got in 2016 in the state of Georgia.
Well, yeah.
The only way that happens is if more people died.
Well, I'll give you another variable in that in 2020, there were so many individuals that were Republicans that were disgusted with the behavior that Georgia in 2020 saw, and I know this just based on the testimony that I've watched during the hearings, but that Georgia had almost more of the down ballot elections had more response than the presidential. That there were something like 80,000 Republicans in the 2020 election that voted almost Republican just down the line, except for the presidency. They just did not vote in the presidential election. And that also had an effect on the number of votes that Donald Trump got. That may not have made up for the 50,000 that he had less. It may have been a part of that.
Yeah.
But they fully acknowledged that based on the data that the Secretary of State presented was that Georgia saw more down ballot votes than they saw for president. So that has an effect.
Yeah, and there's also like the AJC did a profile. There was a voter in like rural the mountains.
Yeah.
Who I think he voted for Warnock, the senator. It's like they did a profile on him because it's like you voted hard right up until 2020, and you voted for he was one of these Warnock Loeffler voters. Like he voted for Loeffler before, but now he voted for Warnock or something like that.
Okay.
And he said it was because he was disgusted. He was just disgusted with the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And just imagine, if this happens, like some people are afraid, you won't be able to be disgusted with the Republican Party or the Democratic Party.
Right. The states
be what it is. The
states being able to choose their own electorates. I am not comfortable with that, with the Democrats or the Republicans having that power. Just
exactly. I think the people should have to vote. The people should have a choice.
Gotcha. Yep. I agree. That's ultimately what drives politics.
Yeah.
Or it should.
Exactly.
That's the way it should be.
Barrett, you're more than welcome to come on my show and talk.
Absolutely.
I can't. Yeah.
Absolutely. I look forward to that, and I absolutely appreciate you coming on and discussing Moore versus Harper with me, as well as the JFK assassination, because I'm going to regret that later, but because I know I'm going to get comments. JFK was only killed by Oswald, or how dare you slander the Secret Service? I'm not saying it was on. I'm not saying it was on purpose. The only person that we know factually that had intent. Well, I can't say that. The only person that we believe had intent of killing JFK was Lee Harvey Oswald. That is ultimately the decision that's been rendered.
Well, he was put up to it by people. That's not up for debate. He was egged on.
That is
supported.
True. That is true.
That's not up for debate.
Yeah.
And no one debates that.
Right.
He was not truly a lone wolf.
No, he was not.
It's only the degree to which he was supported that people are debating.
Right. Yep. I agree. That is. Yeah. So, if you've listened today and you've learned something, either something that was factual or something that was Barrett's conspiracy theory into JFK, you've learned something. Take that for what it's worth.
Or the fact the Georgia DOT might or might not have been storing stuff under a bridge, and somebody had to save their job
and deleted a bunch of data or moved data. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, the corruption. All right. Ben, thank you very much for being on the show. You can check out Ben's podcast, available across the podcast spectrum. It is the History Voyager Podcast. I listen to it on Apple iTunes, so make sure that if you are on Apple iTunes, go out there and give them one of those 5-star reviews, because they're invaluable when it comes to making sure that our shows are being promoted towards the top in people's searches. So that would work for me as well. So, Ben,
I'm terrible with telling people to like and subscribe. So
like and subscribe Ben's podcast. Just do it. Yeah.
And also Barrett's podcast.
Thanks, Ben.
I subscribe to yours on Google Podcasts. I don't know if that helps anything, but
hey, whatever. If it's driving up the Google numbers, fact, I'll take it. No worries.
Yeah.
As always, thank you, Neek the Geek, engineer and producer, owner and operator of GOT Sound Studio. Check out details on how you can utilize his talent and production expertise at gotsoundstudio.com. Thanks to Muff the Producer. You can follow him on Instagram at Muff the Producer. Thanks to Shiana Rivers for our intro and outro. Follow her podcast, Who You Callin' Holistic. As well, thanks to Trent Clark, aka DJ Lonzo, currently entertaining the main course in Columbia, South Carolina. Make sure to go by, have a good time. You can contact Trent for all your entertainment needs. Trent at theallaboutnothing.com and on Instagram at TheRealDJLonzo or by phone 803-262-7982. If you enjoy the show, consider becoming a patron by visiting our website and clicking on the link at the top of the browser. That will take you over to our Patreon page. You can find details on how you become a supporter. You can check out our benefits there, or just consider a donation so that we can continue to bring you this nonsense. We enjoy doing it. We enjoy you enjoying it. As always, you can follow us on Facebook. Just search for All About Nothing US, on Twitter and Instagram at AAN_pod, or find links to all of our social media and available podcast platforms by visiting theallaboutnothing.com. If you'd like to be heard on the show, you may call and leave us a message, 803-672-0533. If the time between these episodes is too far apart, you can fill that time by checking out our partner podcasts. Zach and I host What the Pod Was That with Carrie Simmons, available on most of your podcast platforms. You can visit whatthepodwasthat.com for links and details. Carrie and Chrissy host Status Macabre on most of the podcast platforms as well. Find details at statusmacabre.com. As well, you can check out our own DJ Lonzo's Top 5, hosted by Trent Clark, available on most of your podcast listening platforms. All right, Ben, thank you very much for being on the program. Anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
Be kind to people. History Voyager Podcast, available literally anywhere. It's in the top 10% in the world, despite my, I never say like and subscribe, but like and subscribe it.
All right, Ben, thank you very much for being on the program. We will have another one, I imagine, soon. Make sure to check out the History Voyager podcast, available everywhere.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening, everybody. You all have a great week.
This The All About Nothing podcast is recorded live from the Maddie Johnson podcast studio at GOT Sound Studio in Columbia, South Carolina. The All About Nothing podcast is produced and engineered by Neek the Geek, owner and operator of GOT Sound Studio. To support the show, please visit theallaboutnothing.com for links to social media, merchandise, and more. Become a patron of the show by following the Patreon link at the top of our page. The All About Nothing podcast is an entertainment product of Barrett Gruber. Special thanks to Zach King, Trent Clark, Muff the Producer, Neek the Geek, and you, our listeners. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share. If you're on YouTube, please hit the like button and the notification bell. Thank you for listening.